Hey everyone, and welcome to Think Copilot. My name is Garry Trinder. I'm a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft, focused on Microsoft 365, and I have with me today Waldek.
Hey folks, good day. My name is Waldek Mastykarz, and I am developer advocate for Microsoft 365 at Microsoft.
And we have a guest with us today. Albert, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Everyone knows me as Appy, so let's do Appy. Works better. I work at Blis. We're a tech company. We build cool stuff, basically. And I'm the CTO, and I've been playing around with all the cool stuff that Copilots bring. So it's awesome to be in the show.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. So yes, we're going to talk about Copilots today. So the first question really is, how are you using Microsoft Copilots in your day-to-day work?
It's I would say a trick question. There's so many Copilots. It's getting confusing. But let's say all of them. Well, I can't say that I use all of them. I think I used I use a few of them. I think the most used for me is the GitHub Copilot. Obviously, if you write code, that definitely makes sense. And I think we had Bing Chat Enterprise and M365 Copilot. That is now Microsoft Copilot in Windows, if I'm correct. But generally speaking, the different versions, either they're more broad, like large language model, you can just chat with it. So it, for me, changed at least the way that I search for things. There are things that I can definitely Bing or Google for it. But if you want to get into details a bit more, it helps if you get an answer that is like more human, so you can actually have some sort of interaction and ask a few follow-up questions to really sharpen what you're trying to achieve. And that's the Bing Chat Enterprise stuff that I use like almost daily, just iterating on things that I'm trying to do. And the GitHub Copilot is more into your work experience. So you're writing code and you get the type ahead that you probably already know, but now it's slightly more smarter. Or if you have to take over a code base or you have to debug an issue, you can interact with your code differently. So you can start asking questions. And there are, especially at least for me, are things that I'm not doing on a daily basis. So coming up with, I don't know, complex link queries. You have to like filter out a specific set. So I can just describe what I want and then get like 80, 90, 95, 98% of the code ready saying, okay, this is it. Regex expressions, I always fail at them. So please tell me what to write. That's what I use it, I would say, most often for.
Fantastic. So you mentioned something there that was quite interesting. I've not heard it before. It was taking over another code base, right? And using Copilot for that. So, how is Copilot helping you with that? You're a consultant, right? So I'm assuming you're seeing different code bases all the time.
Yeah, so the trick here is if you do a project and you are starting from the beginning, it can help you scaffold and it can, but to be honest, there are already a lot of tools that can do scaffolding for you. And there are templates and whether you use code or whether you use Visual Studio, there are solutions that can help you like set up your product pretty quick, I would say. And still Copilot is awesome for that. But imagine that you have to be flown into a project, like there is a bug and you don't know the code base yet. And like when I did, I would say SharePoint projects, code bases tend to be rather small, or at least small compared to if you join a SaaS company that has been working on a solution for, I don't know, 5 years with 15 developers, then you have like multiple lines of code into the millions. And then Copilot can really explain a bit like, okay, what's the structure of the project? Or, hey, I'm trying to achieve this. I know that there is a problem in probably this segment of the code, but please help me better understand what it is doing. Or, hey, how is this referenced at other locations? So it can help around with getting the lay of the land a bit. That's I didn't expect that. I saw some demos and that was like, yeah, this is actually making sense, especially if you want to save time just getting up to speed in a project. So on the one end, it's the really small things like a really dedicated, I need to write this link query, or I have to merge to list objects that are not explicitly the same. Please give me like the plumbing for that. And on the other end, it's just if you're diving into a project, you can click through what is there and you can like read all the code, but you can also say, okay, I went through it, this is what I see. Is there anything I missed? Or are there other important things that your Copilot identifies that you might have not seen yet? So I really like experimenting with that approach of the whole Copilot experience.
Are you now in a stage where you kind of like it's the first thing on your mind where you got to do something, like you basically default to Copilot, or is it a conscious decision that you start doing something? Oh yeah, I have this assistant.
For me, it's not default yet. I do like 50-50. There are still a lot of use cases where I just go to Google or Bing and say, I'm looking for this, like I have this problem. And I read an interesting article around that, I think last week, and it really went into prompt engineering versus problem definition and the whole take, and I really like the take. So that everyone talks now about prompt engineering, and you can't open LinkedIn without some influencer talking about how important prompt engineering is. I'm like, okay, I get that, but in the end, it's not really prompt engineering. The AI models get smarter, and like GPT-4 can help you like write the good prompt that for what you're trying to achieve. But it's more about thinking, okay, what's the problem that I have? How can I define the problem so that whether it's an AI model or maybe a colleague can help me out? And that really got me thinking, like, that's what I'm trying to do, right? If you read code, if you're writing a proposal, or whether you're like, if you want to get the best result, you really have to identify what I'm trying to tackle, what I'm trying to communicate. And then an AI model can really help you hone that best proposal. And that's where you can save time. So that for me was like the eye opener, where like, okay, there are problems that are sort of like a yes or no answer. I don't really need AI for that. I can just go do a search engine or read documentation and that will help. If I'm trying to reason or try to come up with like what's the best approach, then I can have sort of an interaction. And that's where really for me a Copilot stakes. It's not asking it one question. So I'm not going to ask it like, what meetings do I have today? I can open my calendar and that's going to be quicker. What I might ask is, okay, overall the meetings that I have the last, 7 days, please group them by company, give me a brief description of what I did in those meetings, or please summarize this Teams meeting. That really works. But just saying, what meetings do I have today? Not sure if, like, I can ask it will return that for me, but I don't really see the value there. It's more in the reasoning part for me.
You mentioned an interesting point, right? The ability to explain what is it that you need. And that reminds me, just the other day, I think we had another chat with somebody else who mentioned exactly that, like the rubber duck debugging, where before you're allowed to ask anything, you get this rubber duck or whatever you've got, and you explain your issue to it. And as you go through explaining it, you find yourself like 8 out of 10 times solving your own issue, because you clarified the issue in your mind. So this is, I think, exactly that, where even before we got AI, there reminds me also, there was this famous story of a professor at school who would have in a waiting room like this big bear. And before student was allowed to go to him to ask him things, he would have to explain problem to the bear. Yeah. And again, like 8 out of 10 times, they would just sort it out on them by themselves through explaining it to somebody else, just going through their mind, right? So I think, if anything else, it's even before the era of AI, it was already obvious that we get entangled into the things where we're stuck. And just going through the motions of explaining, ordering like the things that we think about, that is already invaluable by itself. And I think the same skill proves important more than ever now, because we have this ever present assistant, which is only as good as our ability to explain what we need.
Yeah, totally. And whether you write code where you're explaining to a colleague, okay, this code is, like, it might not be compiling or it's missing something. Okay, I've got this issue. And then like the first remark, like, okay, did you put it through GitHub Copilot? Can it reason why it might occur? And you get like really weird questions like, did you check permissions? And they're all obvious questions, but my colleague would ask probably pretty much the same questions. And just me going through the hoops of explaining, yes, I did that, or no, I didn't. That's already really valid feedback. And now I don't have to bother a colleague with like the first 10 obvious things to check. I have an AI assistant that can do that.
Is it on? Is the cable plugged, basically?
But it's the same when you write like a proposal. What I can do is I can just ask in my, I don't know, my Copilot in Word, I can just ask, okay, in this document, what are the top 5 things that a CTO might ask if he reads this proposal? And then I get like 5 questions, and I can say, okay, maybe I answer those not clearly enough, or maybe I should do like a frequently asked questions at the end where I at least tackle those 5 or 10 questions that people might have. Or I could say a sales proposal, like, does it make sense? Am I missing anything in my layout of my document? Or can you write me the management summary? And you get a draft where you can go through like, okay, this is making sense, or this is not clear enough. So from that perspective, like the rubber ducking, that's where I really see the value, for me at least.
Yeah, which I guess, from an assistant perspective, that's what you want, right? I think, like, I was thinking, like, how behaviors kind of change. And, as I've been kind of going through as a junior dev and you're working in teams, you always have this rule of, if you get stuck, right, spend a little bit of time trying to figure it out yourself, right? Learn how to solve that problem. If you can't solve it after X amount of time, go and ask your colleague. If your colleague doesn't help you, go and ask Twitter or socials and just see if anyone else has that issue. And now I'm thinking, well, that first part is like, oh, well, we'll just ask the AI before we ask our colleague, and then we reduce the amount of distractions that we've got in our team. So it's not just you being more productive, it's like your whole team being more productive, because they can concentrate on the work that they're doing, and they're not getting distracted all the time. So it's interesting how that kind of plays out. I'm thinking, well, it's a totally different dynamic in a team now, because AI is there.
Yeah, for me, the only tricky part there is you mentioned like a junior dev can use it. And one of the risks that I see is that we work a lot with quite new technology, and even GitHub Copilot, while it's really up to date, there are a lot of things that it cannot reason about. So let's say you're using, it's a sample. There are other samples as well, but let's imagine you're using the Teams AI kit and you want to use GitHub Copilot for that. Like, it's not adding any value there because it doesn't understand the SDK. So when you ask it something, it will come up with like, oh, you could do this. And then the method does not exist, or the method expects like 3 properties instead of, I don't know, 6 that are provided. And the downside that I see there is that a lot of junior devs are struggling a bit with that, because if you then use GitHub Copilot, like, help me out, I'm trying to achieve this, you get like the gist is okay, but the code it renders is like 70% off. And as a junior dev, you think, oh, this should work. You paste it in and you accept it, and then it doesn't really do what you expect it to do. So if you're a junior, the learning curve becomes harder, because now you have to understand, like, okay, the Copilot is giving me wrong stuff. I have to go to the SDK documentation to actually interpret, like, what are the methods? How is it working? And that's going to be, I would say, at least tricky for the next 3 years. Either the Copilots have to become better, and then you say, okay, I don't know this specific SDK, or I don't know this specific structure, I cannot reason about it. Or you as a junior have to like accept, okay, what's coming. It might compile, but it's not doing what I'm trying to achieve. Because otherwise the burden on your more senior developers becomes even more, because juniors can crank out more code quicker. And like, how are you going to prevent overload on that side? But maybe at some point we'll get Copilots that help you review pull requests and can then at least give some more feedback on that level.
Yeah, and then you will have 2 assistants going over the same PR, one from the dev, one from the reviewer, just back and forth.
One generating code, the one reviewing, until you get to the green state, right? Great. So talk to about a few things. If you got, let's say, what was the last prompt that you used in your work? What scenario did that help you with?
My biggest time saver was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had a week off, or I went to the States for a week. So I couldn't work, and I had to like do a handover. And what I did is I just asked my Copilot, the M365 Copilot, okay, please give me a overview of the work that I did in the last X amount of time. Please group it either by customer or domain. And what you then get back is like a list of, okay, you worked for 7 customers in the last 7 days. These are the last emails. And it helped me prep my handover email saying, okay, please, colleague, can you follow up on this? Please, can you monitor that? And this is what I did. It's going to be this week. I'm out of office. There won't be any progress on this project because I'm the only one that worked on it. So that was the biggest time saver. Otherwise, I had to go to my calendar, see what I did, have to go to my email, what were my last emails, go to my Teams messages. And now you get like the overview, including the citation links that point to that direct message. That was on the M365 one, the thing that I used last. And I did an Azure OpenAI masterclass, and I used the Bing Chat Enterprise Copilot version just to ping off some ideas for workshop forms, like, okay, I want to do an energizer. What would make sense in this context? I came up with this program. Is there anything missing? Is this a logical structure? And then you get like feedback like, okay, maybe don't end with all the legal stuff. Maybe start because it's slightly slide heavy, so to say. So you shouldn't end the day with slide heavy content. Like, okay, that's making sense. So there are a few. And what I like is that there are a lot of prompt samples out there. There's the PMP prompt sample. We did some work in Edu. So the Microsoft education team came up with a prompt sample library for within education. If you go to the internet, there's like for GitHub Copilot, there are a lot of samples out there. So I really like playing around with them just to see what does it do for me. And there are samples that really work. There are also samples like, okay, not working for me. But at least now I know that they exist. So there are quite a few that are fun to play around with.
And is there a prompt you find yourself use more often than anything else? Like favorite prompt, or like the one like you have in like a little frame on top, just like I need to use that.
For me, the ask me 5 questions on this topic that anyone would have is what I use most. So when I write a proposal, okay, is it clear? What are the top 5 questions that you would ask as this role if you would receive this proposal or this document? And then role can be dynamic, can be like, if it's a sales proposal, it's like sales manager. If it's a high-level design, okay, I don't know, engineer. What are your top 5 questions that you would have if you would read this short document or this letter? And you could apply that to anything you put on LinkedIn or Twitter. Like if I would have this tweet, does it trigger you? Or what are your 5 questions about this tweet? And then your 5 follow-up tweets on that topic. I really like that. Someone that just keeps triggering me. What are you working on? Does it make sense?
I wonder if there's like equivalent phrase for this, like Eli 5, like ask or explain like on 5. Basically, that like equivalent for this, like the 5 things to ask afterwards or whatever. Like, is there a phrase for this? You can just stab into it and you're done.
That would be fun. Theoretically, there might be something. I know if you look at the Edu prompts, there is a prompt that says something like, okay, quiz me on this topic with at least X amount of questions. And that helps you like validate whether you understand the topic that you just went through some learning through. And I was like, okay, maybe I should like ask that for anything I deliver, like quiz me on this topic. Like, do I really thoroughly understand what I just tried to put out there?
Yeah, I just have this little phrase like quiz 5, or I don't know, like something that I wonder if there's like a hidden gem on that that you can just step in like, and AI is like, oh yes, you mean that? Yep. Like as opposed to you having to write a novel that you would like to have like 5 questions that somebody would reasonably ask after reading. It's like, no, just quiz 5. Boom.
Maybe at some point we'll get some extensibility option where you can just add your own prompt and press a button and go.
Aliases, there you go. Yes.
Yeah. Aliases in Copilot. That would be awesome.
It's just like I always have these things. We had an example around using like a plugin to ensure that communications, for example, hit a particular standard or value, so that you're almost self-checking, right, of the things that you're putting out. And I think maybe when we talk about AI, you know, we go straight into the, oh, you can create a blog post, or you can create a tweet, blah, blah, blah. And you just say, hey, create me this, and you get an output. But, you know, what actually is another way of doing that is, you know, you can use it to just get started. You can use it to take what you have written. You know, you have that moment of creativity. You put something down in Word, and then you go, right, now I need to just review this and make it better, right? It's kind of going back to what we were saying, like the rubber duck, like, hey, how can I make this better? But you're staying in the loop, right? It's all your work. You're using the review parts of Copilot.
Yeah, I did a creative writing workshop like a month ago where a actual author went through, okay, what are prompts that can help you write better? And it's not around like, write me this blog post, but it's all around, okay, I've got this ID, this is the topic, this is what I'm trying to, this is the message that I'm trying to convey. Please write me a draft blog post. And then you get like, I don't know, a 0.1. And then you're iterating on that, like, okay, write me a few engaging headlines so you can figure out, okay, what's making sense for me. Validate the structure. Is this making sense? If I would put this out, are there things missing in my blog post? So you can come up with, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 prompts that you can sort of go through in a process to write better copy. You can do the exact same if you write a high-level design, because like there are industry standards. So I'm writing a high-level design. Does it match this industry standards? If I have an architect reviewing this and he's focused on security, is the order correct? Do I miss anything? Do I maybe want to use different wording, or like, does it make? So that's where I really see AI shine, at least for me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So we talked about a few things that you've been using. You know, you want to use it more. You're experimenting as well with different prompts. Can you remember, like, let's go back to right at the beginning, right? You're just trying these things out. Can you describe, you know, what was that wow moment that you were like, oh, okay, I've got to keep trying this. This is worth me investing my time in.
Twofold. So the first one, like when ChatGPT came out, we all, or at least I expect everyone, tried to get in the free trial and play around with it a bit. I have to be honest, I don't know, the first 10 things were all around, okay, please write 10 tweets for me, and please write me a LinkedIn post. I was like, okay, this is fun. But then Copilot came out, and I was like, okay, not really seeing any value there. Like, I know what my meetings are, and like, I know how to prep for a meeting. I try to work in systems, and I've got checklists, and that works for me. But like the wow moment on the M365 Copilot was really like, okay, what did I do last week? Group it by, give me references. It was like, okay, this is where, if it has access to your personal data, then all of a sudden I can like reason more. And that was like, okay, maybe I can ask it, okay, you know what I've written in the past few weeks. Were there any things missing? Did I, okay, when I write an email to that customer, please reference the last email that I used. So it's more where I see some like speed optimizations where I don't have to go back, find my email and interact on that, but I can ask Copilot to reference that, put in a link, I don't know, expand on something that I did previously. So the first was like, okay, it's interacting more humane than asking a question to a search engine. That was like wow factor 1. But then, okay, it's fun, but still I have to do my work. Now that it has access to my own data, it's really interesting to see, okay, what can I do and how can it help me reason over the things that I'm doing? So it's the same for GitHub Copilot, right? We've all been writing code. We probably all went to Stack Overflow and copy pasted from there, and it worked in a way. But now we're at this point where you can like say, okay, I have this specific problem with this part of the code, either explain why the error is happening or like rubber duck it, or I have this specific task, please help me put the plumbing in place, and that's it.
Yeah, and also what's really, really cool, right, is that when you use Copilot, it's kind of you could make a comparison like with Stack Overflow or just internet search, Quora, and all of that. Having a generic answer versus answer specifically for your thing, because Copilot, like, you feed it with your content, code, whatever it is, and you get answer based on specifically that. So even if the answer is based on generic, let's say, patterns and approaches, it's still adjusted to your stuff, and that makes it so much easier to apply. Because like if you get a code sample from internet, like there's a chance that it will not match your naming convention, your design patterns, whatever. Whereas this is just automatically adjusted, so saving you time also to integrate that.
If you pick the regex sample, you can go to sites to get sample regexes, and then you get like the actual regex. If I'm in the Copilot experience and I say I want this regex, it will say, okay, we'll put it automatically in a var for you, or maybe in a typed object because it makes more sense in your structure. Oh, by the way, I'll create a function for you because then you can put your string through this function and it makes more sense. Or the interface. Yeah. So yeah, totally. A generic internet sample, you always have to like actually come up with how does this work in my code. And if you use GitHub Copilot, it's like in your context, and it might not be perfect, but at least it's like 80 to 90% what you're already looking for, and you have to reason about it. And it's the same with all the other things that you get in GitHub Copilot, like comments. If I'm typing a comment, like I want to describe what's happening, then all of a sudden I got like 3 sentences exactly what the code is doing. So I don't have to come up with like, what is it doing, more why am I doing it like this here? And that's, that really is the time saver for me.
Yeah, it's really like the two things, right? So one is, you mentioned regex. Like, how often is it the case that you grab regex from somewhere and it does almost what you need, but just this one thing isn't there, and you spend more time adjusting that long string to do your thing as opposed to just coming up with your own, right? So it's like, it's so much easier to even be able to feed that. It's like, okay, I've got this, change this to do also this thing, and it's done. And two, what are the odds that in 3 or 5 months time or a year, we find ourselves that the most used key on the keyboard is tab?
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised.
I think it's a really good point. The kind of, you're taking something and adjust it and using that context and using that conversational element, right, that GitHub Copilot gives you. Or rather, there's like the chat experience and there's the kind of IntelliSense experience, right? And I'm just thinking back to some of the examples of maybe I'm writing a PowerShell script and I'll kind of start with, okay, I want to do this. And it gives me the starting point. And then it's like, okay, adjust this to do this. And then you're just having this kind of conversation of just like, you know, I'm not writing the code, but I'm just instructing the AI to do what I want as the outcome. And then because, you know, I don't want a full script, I'm just like, oh, give me this as a one-liner now. Because, you know, I can just, and it will do it. But you know exactly, you've designed it. The code has been generated for you, but you've been in control all the way along. I really love that approach, because you can almost learn as you're doing that as well. Like, if it's not something that you do every day, but you've got a bit of experience around, like something like PowerShell, then I think it works really well to work in that way.
Well, imagine you're an admin and you handed an M365 tenant that you have to manage. You'll know PowerShell a bit from previous experience, but you get a request like, okay, give me all, I don't know, planner plans that were created over a year ago, something weird. Now, you know PowerShell, so you could probably write the script, but it will take you some time because you have to Google for, okay, what's the exact command that I'm looking for? How do I do authentication? Now you can go to like any Copilot basically and say, okay, I'm looking for a script that does this. You probably get 95% correct what you're trying to do. Maybe you want to tweak it a little bit, and then you can either ask follow-up questions saying, okay, I want to export it as a CSV, or maybe I want to format it like this, or maybe I want to write it to my console rather than doing CSV. And that will probably bring you almost all the way. And the only requirement is that you'll need to understand how PowerShell works. So some basic understanding will help you validate what you're doing. It's not that you don't need to know anything, but you'll need to know something. That as long as you can describe what you're trying to do and can read the output, which is I would say, doable skill, then you can write that script. And that's really cool if you're if you need to do something that you don't do on a daily basis.
Yeah, perfect. Right. Well, Appy, thank you very much for joining us today, for sharing your insights, experiences of using all the different Copilots. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from you in the coming months as you are experimenting even more. So with that, I want to thank everyone for listening and for watching, and we will say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.